Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to dive deep into the Renaissance?
Always ready.
Got a fantastic YouTube lecture here that breaks down this era and how it sparked like a chain reaction of events and ideas. Ideas that are still shaping our world, even today.
Yeah, and it's amazing how this video starts. Comparing pre-Renaissance Europe to a dark age. Like the entire continent was asleep for centuries.
Right, literally centuries. The video makes it crystal clear that Europe was just stuck. Like feudalism was everywhere, religion dictated life, and intellectual and cultural growth. Forget about it, seriously. How do you even start to change after centuries of being stagnant?
It's fascinating because the Renaissance wasn't just like, bam, a sudden change. It was this gradual awakening, right? And the video really stresses that. And like the word Renaissance itself, it means rebirth. It's a rediscovery of all that classical Greek and Roman thought, art, everything like those ancient ideas suddenly come back to life. And boom, new perspectives, new innovations, all of it.
And Italy, right. You can't talk about the Renaissance without talking about Italy. This lecture makes it super clear that the Renaissance wasn't a single event, right? It was this wave of change that impacted everything. Art, science, culture, even politics, all of it.
Absolutely. In the video, it goes deep into how this era saw this big shift toward humanism. The focus moved away from just religion and rulers to the individual, like what's their potential. It was radical for the time.
Yeah.
That humans had inherent worth, that they could shape their own destinies. Wild.
So interesting. The video argues that this focus on individual potential, that it led to these massive changes in art and philosophy, and even in social values, concepts like secularism, equality, even early forms of capitalism, all discussed as being rooted in this humanistic shift.
Yeah, exactly. And to understand, secularism in the context of the Renaissance, you have to imagine a society where the church, its influence, it's starting to be questioned. Even art started to reflect that. Religious themes were still there, sure, but you also started to see a rise in secular art. Portraits of people, landscapes, even scenes from mythology.
Wow. Like people were finally starting to see themselves as something more than just subjects of a king or the church. Had a huge impact on art.
Right, absolutely. And the video, it uses the example of Leonardo da Vinci, right, and the Mona Lisa to illustrate this point. Even today, even if someone isn't into art at all, they've heard of the Mona Lisa. And this shows you how the Renaissance, how its emphasis on realism and human-centric themes, it resonated like across centuries. And of course, we can't forget, the other icons, Michelangelo, Raphael, they brought this new perspective to life.
Okay, so we've got art changing, we've got society changing, but the video also makes this bold claim, right? It says modern science has its roots in the Renaissance. During this time, scientific thinking, it just took off, even though it often clashed with what the church was teaching.
And that clash is key to the story. The video gets into Copernicus and his heliocentric theory. It proposed that the Earth revolved around the sun. This directly challenged the church's view, right? The geocentric view, that the Earth was the center of everything.
Whoa, talk about shaking things up. And I remember learning about Galileo, right, and his telescope, how his observations supported Copernicus and got him into so much trouble with the church. The video doesn't really go deep into that, but it does mention Kepler and his mathematical work, which helped explain how the planets moved.
What's important, though, is that these Renaissance thinkers, they weren't just making discoveries, right? They were developing a completely new way of looking at the world, challenging everything. They relied on observation and reason to understand the universe. That's huge. This laid the groundwork for what we call the scientific method.
This explosion of knowledge, of new ideas, it needed a way to spread.
Right.
And that's where the printing press comes in. The video makes it clear how revolutionary this was. Mass production of books. Suddenly, knowledge was accessible to way more people.
The printing press was a game changer, truly. Imagine a world where books, they were all handwritten and super rare. But suddenly, bam, the printing press, now you've got multiple copies of these texts, spreading like wildfire throughout Europe. It impacted literacy rates and education, fueled the Renaissance even more, like throwing gasoline on a fire.
It's like the Renaissance was this domino effect, this chain reaction. One change leading to another and another. Amazing to think how it shaped the world we live in. Speaking of domino effects, right? The video connects the printing press to something you might not expect. Modern banking. It mentions Italy's oldest banks like Banca Monte dei Passi di Siena and Mediobanca as examples.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of forget about, the economic side of the Renaissance, but it's a huge part of it. Think about it, right? New ideas are spreading, trade is expanding, people need new ways to manage their money. These early Italian banks, well, they were basically leading the way. developing, financial instruments, new practices, things that would become like the foundation of global commerce.
Okay, so the printing press spreads knowledge, leads to discoveries, which fuels economic growth, which then requires new banking systems. Man, it really is a chain reaction. And all this innovation, all this prosperity, well, it led to another huge development, the age of exploration. The video highlights this thirst for knowledge, new trade routes, and, well, let's be honest, wealth. And it drove Europeans to, venture further and further beyond their borders.
And of course, the most famous example, right? Columbus's voyage in 1492. And this is where things get really interesting. So Columbus, he set sail hoping to find a new route to India, something that, Vasco da Gama actually did a few years later. But Columbus stumbled on something completely unexpected, a whole new continent.
The Americas, can you believe it? This one voyage, driven by, that Renaissance spirit, it reshaped the course of history.
But it's important to remember, right, that while this was a moment of discovery for Europeans, it wasn't really a discovery. I mean, people were already living in the Americas. There were societies, cultures, histories all already there.
Yeah, that's a good point. The video talks about this connection, right, between the Renaissance and European colonialism. It's a complicated legacy. Because, see, as Europe is experiencing all this growth, this advancement, well, it's also laying the groundwork for colonization all over the world.
Exactly. And the video doesn't shy away from that. From the darker side of things, it highlights how that same spirit, the same exploration and innovation that we see in the Renaissance, well, it also fueled European expansion. And, well, the exploitation of resources and people. In the Americas, in Africa, in Asia.
It's a reminder that progress, it isn't always straightforward. There can be ethical and social implications too.
And that's why understanding the Renaissance is so important. It's not just about, beautiful art or amazing scientific discoveries. It's about understanding the full impact, the good and the bad, and how it continues to shape us today.
I think the video does a great job of connecting all these events, right? It shows how the Renaissance, those ideas, those innovations, they had these ripple effects. They went way beyond Europe, shaped a global trade, politics, power dynamics, for centuries.
Yeah. It even argues that if the Renaissance had never happened, history would be completely different. I mean, imagine, right? No Renaissance, no humanism, no scientific advancements, none of those masterpieces, no exploration. Would we even be close to the same level of progress?
It's almost impossible to imagine. No Mona Lisa, no scientific revolution, no discovery of America. It shows just how important this period was to all of human history.
And it makes us think, what parts of our lives today, well, can we trace back to the Renaissance? Where are those sparks of curiosity and innovation still burning today?
Yeah, it really is like this seed, planted centuries ago, and it's still growing, still branching out.
Exactly. And that brings us to the main takeaway from this whole deep dive, right? The Renaissance, it wasn't just a moment in time. It was like the start of a chain reaction. And it's still unfolding, still, touching every aspect of our lives. From the art that we love to the technology we use, even to how we see the world, how we see ourselves in it.
So we're wrapping up our deep dive into the Renaissance, and I want to go back to this question the video asked. What if it never happened? What if there was no Renaissance? How different would everything be? I mean, would we have all this, artistic brilliance, scientific advancement, technological innovation, all of it?
Yeah, it's a question that could spark endless debate. It really makes you think, would we even recognize the world without the Renaissance?
It's crazy to imagine. No Mona Lisa, no scientific revolution, no discovery of the Americas. It really shows you how pivotal this period was for all of human history.
Absolutely, and it challenges us to think about, what parts of our lives today can we connect back to this time of rebirth and renewal? Where do we see, those sparks of curiosity, of innovation, all that stuff happening today?
That is such a great question to leave our listeners with as we go about our day. It's fascinating to think about those connections to the Renaissance, from our, love of learning, exploring new things, to that belief in human potential and the power of ideas to change the world.
It's true. I mean, the Renaissance, it reminds us that history, it isn't just some collection of dates and events. It's alive.
Yeah.
It shapes our present, shapes our future.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Renaissance. Hopefully you all learned something new, and maybe, just maybe, you're feeling a little more curious about the world around you.